There seems to be an awful lot of sad stories in the news today, and there are thousands missing. Does anybody care? We built a channel where we talk about those faces. Talking news. Debbie. Cassie Barons has still not been found, and it's been 2 years since her case first hit the spotlight. Breaking. Child Gabriel and Lily Vallow both behind bars. Sarah Galloway was found. She wasn't found alive. What happened to Sarah Galloway?
It's too heartbreaking to share.
Children are still missing. Children like Dorsey. You're in she. He just got away with it. Welcome to Talking News. Hello everyone. My name is Debbie. We use big stories to push little faces.
Hello everyone, welcome to Chasing a Murder Talking News. My name is Debbie, and before we get started, I would like to ask you guys to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and also hit the notification bell if you would like notifications whenever we have new uploads. And I want to reach out and say I'm so sorry guys, I have been so incredibly busy trying to get back on track, putting an office together so that I can make cleaner videos. And so today we are going to be talking about the Vallow case. So this is going to be Life Beyond the Grave, part 45. Can you believe it? Guys, I'm not even halfway through. So let me know if you like these kind of details that I'm sharing, because what we're doing is actually trying to figure out how this case got to where it is. I mean, to where a mother who was a Mormon ended up creating her own little side branch, which I like to refer to as a cult, that was preparing for end times, and they were actually starting to build something called the Church of the Firstborn, which was also, it's referred to as the 144,000. And because the story is so complex with beliefs, you really need to have at least a basic understanding of what the Church of the Firstborn is. Because this is something that the people Lori is following in 2015 are talking about. They are talking about the Church of the Firstborn. They are talking about the 144,000. And they are talking about Jesus Christ's second coming. And that we have to prepare. And we need to make sure that we have done all of our ordinances. And according to which group you are talking about at the time, you know, are you good enough to be part of this 144,000. The blood moon approaches, and well, there's actually several lunar eclipses in this time, and that's quite rare, and we're going to go into more details on that later. But this is supposed to be one of the signs that definitely Jesus Christ, his second coming, is approaching, and it's approaching quickly. I really could go into a lot of details when we talk about the Church of the Firstborn. The 144 is basically based on who is really reading about it in Revelation, and which religious group is reading it. So let's kind of sum it up. Mormons believe there are a literal 144 chosen to be sealed and will be on a mission during tribulations to prepare for the second coming. A mission of redemption and to rebuild the godly people by sifting through the wicked, the sinful people on this earth and finding those who are worthy. And this is done in the post-rapture world. So many of these chosen will be translated beings, which this is something you'll hear Lori talk about, and it will be in the investigation papers later on in this case. but this is something we will kind of cover here and there throughout this series. Now, years ago, there was a group that started off as an offshoot of the LDS about 1961, and it involves the Morris-Site War. So this is a skirmish between the LDS, it's a select area known as the Morsites, and the territorial government of Utah, which, guys, was founded by Joseph Morris, a self-proclaimed prophet. The people of this occult must ordain the gospel from heart, receive all the ordinances that pertain to the house of the Lord at least. They must be sealed by the Holy Spirit of promise. This means that all, covenants, contracts, bonds, such as marriage, obligations, oaths, vows, performances, connections, associations, and expectations must be sealed by the Holy Spirit of promise, which equals a personal righteousness, okay? Julie Rowe, who we are talking to about quite often during this time, will mention this in her podcast in 2017. Well, it's around July 18th, I think it is, of 2017. And we'll talk about that later. So let's talk about what are translated beings. A translated being in Mormonism is basically a man or a woman, but mostly men, who are chosen by God Himself to be an angel-like, faithful servant of the Lord. The reward is immortal life, where one cannot die or experience pain. They are basically protected in a restful state until they are resurrected. Also, their physical body endures a spiritual change that allows them to avoid sickness, sorrow, again, pain, and some support, depending, on the person themselves, may not even require to eat. Some people say that they do not require to eat. They are ministers to all they choose to preach to. They understand this, and they accept this honorable transition in most cases to be like angels that we hear about in the Bible and other Christian teachings. During the second coming of Jesus Christ, these high servants of God will be changed in a twinkle of an eye from mortality to immortality to inherit exaltation and the kingdom of God. Translated beings now are able to walk this earth as immortal beings, and they will preach about God's holy name and the devastations that are approaching as the second coming nears. They are like gatherers and angels of warning. They are there to prepare for Zion. Something else you must understand before we go forward is the fact that many people misinterpret Zion to be just one place, but actually it can be many places, but in one union called Zion. And what does Zion represent? Well, it represents a perfect society ruled by Jesus Christ. Zion is supposed to be spelled actually S-I-O-N, and then according to the New Testament, okay? So modern day Revelation says that Zion will be built near Jackson County, Missouri. A lot of times Zion will also be known as the New Jerusalem, so taking notes of Salem and Jerusalem for the Chad Daybell group. And then at one point there will finally be one place for all the 144,000 firstborn. And so this is where the problem lies. The final and main idea of Zion is not really agreed upon. through many of the branches of the Mormon groups, and they kind of break off from the main branch, and they create their own ideas of what Zion is and what is needed in order to prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Some of these actually break off and go way outside of the church's teachings. Many of them referred to as preppers. People like Chad Daybell, Julie Rowe, and Lori Vallow had their own idea of what Zion should be. And they're looking for signs such as the blood moon and how the planets will align this blood moon in 2015. And they're also expecting the 10 lost tribes will be the final sign of the end days. And as they, the end days approach and they start gathering to Zion. So when you hear us talk about the 10 lost tribes and their return, it's the restoration of the tribes are basically signs of the gathering to Israel. So who are the 10 lost tribes? Well, I've not really had a whole lot of time to research this, but I have gathered the fact that a lot of the Mormons, they understand which tribe they belong to already. And so basically the members are members of these lost tribes. And once they start gathering, that is definitely the sign of end days. Now, once Zion, it's basically preparing for Jesus Christ's second coming, and Christ has returned to the earth. During this millennial reign, there will be 2 seats of government, one in Jerusalem, one in Israel, and there will be 10 tribes who are restored. It will be built in on the American continent, sorry guys. But if you go back and you read what Joseph Smith says about it, he declared ultimately that all the north, the south parts of America would become Zion. And that basically Zion would be established before the millennium begins in Missouri, the center of that state anyways. The 144,000, they are expected to live to the highest laws of the gospel. New Jerusalem will be established in the last days, just before the second coming. Okay, so let's make sure I got that straight. Interestingly, I found this very important, that once Zion is building and it is established and people start to settle in, this is going to be considered the land of safety, the land of refuge, so the land of peace for the most glorious high God. And this nation will be the only nation not at war with one another. And I want to suggest something for you guys, because it's hard for me to cover all this, and though I did do the research and I could do it right now. Look up Joseph Morris. Okay, I think I did a brief little thing on him, but there's so much more you can know. So what we need to know right now is that the 144 chosen will take part in a resurrection and will reign with Christ in the millennium. Jesus, the new leader of the new covenant. The 144,000 comes from the scripture Revelation 7:4. And in John's vision, he says, quote, I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel, end quote. And Joseph Smith, just like you and I, was supposed to be interested in who these 144,000 are. Many people believing that most of these 144,000 are high priests ordained into the holy order of God. But in some cases, it is known that the 144,000 isn't really an exact number, and that it is the calling for all those to come to the church, as many that will come to the firstborn. So I guess it depends on the group, because in some groups it is the extremely righteous men and women during their time on earth. And for Mormons, they are ordained by angels to whom they have given power over the nations of the earth. What's the reasoning for, what's their purpose? And their purpose is to assist people in, to obtain exaltation. And supposedly they are not the only people who will attain exaltation. So now that we have a basic understanding what the firstborn basically represents and who they are, let's kind of start jumping back into the timeline. So remember, Julie Rowe is one of the very popular names during this time. And around March of 2015, she is at St. George event where she plans to speak at the tabernacle. But suddenly this tabernacle is moved. It's moved to another convention center. The reason for this supposedly is there is just too many people attending this event. So they have to accommodate seating. Once everybody is seated and ready, Julie Rowe is escorted in, and then the meeting begins. Now, I know, guys, that I've been jumping back and forth, and 2015 is a little confusing, but it's very hard to tell it in order. Remember that Chad and Tammy Daybell, they're actually looking for their house in Salem, Rexburg, let's just call it Rexburg, Idaho at the time. Although we're kind of at the timeline, we've been talking a little bit where they're already there and their kids are growing up, they're going on missions. Now, something else that this group of people are interested in is something called the Isaiah Institute, and another company attached to the Mormons that is kind of taking a lead as far as outreach to the Mormon people is something called Color My Media, which is, something you'll come familiar to knowing attached to Preparing the People. And this is a network system, basically. They'll put on events and things like this where they bring in all kinds of Mormons who either are authors, visionaries that speak on their visions, any kind of gifts, some putting out warnings about end days. And it's very, very important that you understand the basics of these networking people and groups attached to these guys. So I know I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to mention it again. So Nancy and Michael James are the ones also running Latter-day Media, along with Color My Media and, the Hebraeus Foundation. I hope I said that right, which is also connected to the Isaiah Institute, all pushing people's attention towards end days while making money pushing those ideas, agendas, or whatever you want to call it. Now, the Isaiah Institute was actually created 2000. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just a little bit. And it was actually created by the Hebraeus that I just mentioned, which focuses on end of the world. So what does the Isaiah Institute pretty much promote? Well, they promote the fact that they want to take more interest into the book of Isaiah and look for messages. So here's what they say, quote, "No longer can the book of Isaiah be regarded as obscure." And the reason why they say this is the group wants to set goals to decode the message in Isaiah. And there are even books written on this topic by this Isaiah Institute by a doctor that I'd rather not mention. The Hebraeus holds conferences titled a time of awakening. And guess what? A lot of this stuff is on Vimeo. This is Lori Vallow's, one of her favorite places to be. So this is the main broadcast source for a lot of these groups in this time attached to the Mormon religion. So here you're kind of getting an idea where Lori's going, her favorite places to hang out, where she likes to get her information. And I'm going to play a video by the Isaiah Institute for you right now.
In which Hebrew prophecy do we find a black pharaoh ruling a superpower? Politicians taking God's people captive. This world's leading nation imploding. A world economy collapsing overnight. Priests and prophets unable to prophesy. An Antichrist who conquers the world. Cities instantly turned into flying chaff. Genocide of entire nations and peoples. An end-time David slaying his Goliath. A forerunner of God's coming to earth. God's elect gathered from every nation. A new creation emerging out of chaos. The dawning of a bright millennial age. Earth regenerating into a new paradise.
So interestingly, why they seem to be a pretty big networking group, and are taking control of a decent number of the Mormon followers, creating this capital business of a new time. So you can see that Julie Rowe is not alone in this end-day frenzy of 2015 in these Vimeo videos from 7 years ago. But interestingly, this is very important as well, and to understand who Lori is during this time, women are starting to feel like they deserve leadership roles within the church, and that they too can be seers, visionary, and prophets. So they're attending events that speak regularly on end days, and it's going to be devastating and scary. So you imagine how they must feel, some of these people. And then also they're learning that women are being called out to walk higher within this church. Now, people are insinuating that Julie Rowe is on these forums quite often walking ahead of the least, so to speak, of the head of the end days in 144,000. She says that it is time to gather from around the world. She points out the patterns in the scriptures. She says in forums that they will be resurrected and become mortal beings. And if you're wondering if Mormons or all LDS members are supportive of Julie, well, that's not the case. In fact, many people are concerned that Julie is stepping over the heads of the church leaders. But Julie says, I do not see that this statement contradicts the 144,000 and the high priest. Defending the fact that, this is something other people have said, including Joseph Smith, had also mentioned the 144,000 would bring as many that would come to the Church of the Firstborn, which we've already discussed. Some supporters of Julie on these forums write that the church has seen what Julie has seen. So they're on the same page, basically. But one has to wonder, who are they referring to when they say the church? There's no doubt that back in 2007, Chad Daybell is basically on board with this sort of thing. And by 2015, he is bouncing back from the recession, and his company is taking off thanks to Julie Rowe. And Chad has mentioned in several blogs that actually he says, quote, my first printing, he's referring to Julie's book, sold out within months. And the ebook versions smashed my book distributors all-time record. Had trouble reading my own notes there, guys. Sorry about that. So Julie actually becomes a very busy speaker with the LDS for a very small period of time. In the year 2015, a lot of the Mormon forums are full of members fighting over whether or not Julie Rowe is a prophetess, etc. So this actually starts raising the red flags for the church, and now Julie has resorted to speaking in private homes, which we've already talked about a little bit, rental halls, and has canceled her appearances after a few posts claiming that she allegedly was banned from the church buildings, so she couldn't speak there any longer. So right now you have, several people, Roger Young, who say that he's actually a good guy. You have Christopher Pratt, Chad Daybell, Julie Rowe, so many of them who are writing books, trying to deliver their own personal messages from heaven, and they're using their gifts to put out warnings about the future. If you were to read Chad Daybell's introductories and some of the things he writes in his books, you would notice that he kind of has this manipulation thing going, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. You can come to your own opinion. He seems to be very supportive of the church, but then he says he warns his readers to beware of those who cry wolf and follow the 12 apostles as your true guide. So he's saying beware of the wolves, which he's one of them. But, he don't practice what he preaches. He also liked to use the church leaders' prints, such as their pamphlets that they put out, especially ones that they released on preparedness, and insinuates that they are preparing for a battle. When this battle comes, you want to be on the Lord's side. And that's back in 2007. But I've never found so far any pamphlets referring to what he's insinuating the leaders are, what kind of messages they're sending out to all the LDS members. So many of the wards in that area for the LDS are getting a lot of concern about these seers, visionaries, and messengers, and end-day websites. And on blogs, there's a guy that goes by Rongo that says, in fact, a blog was posted addressing concerns about family members from his ward who are into AVAL, another voice of warning, and Roger K. Young's teaching/books. These families were holding extra church meetings and trying to build a following. This is labeled a problem that needs to be addressed. The church is having to send out more warnings against these groups and discussion groups like those, another voice of warning, so AVAL, the Freedom Forums, those kind of places. And it's not just tent cities that are now a high priority. It's also guns, ammo, and the mission to protect storage and the tent community whenever the end days approach. There's no doubt that we could find tons on tent cities attached to these groups, but it was a very popular topic among Mormon bloggers and members of the preparedness sites. So sites like Vallow. It started back in about 2010, really getting popular. And there were messages going out that those who have supplies will be allowed to join these tent communities. If you're not prepared, you are not invited. I mention this because we know that Lori Vallow will be part of this prepper community, a supporter, and we know this because her family has told us that she was buying storage supplies and sending it to family members. Again, I want to mention that many LDS members are supportive of being prepared for something emergency that might happen, but not all of them are in support of this extreme end-day preppers groups, as you LDS members listening right now know. It's many of those people who are not supporting many of these prepper groups that are worried about the negative impact and teachings it will have on its followers and within their LDS community, including their family members, which one of them might be supporters of people like Julie Rowe. Many of these concerned LDS members are calling it, as they see it, some of these gifted people as priestcraft supporters. So now you know how Lori Vallow, what kind of people she's surrounding herself with. So if she every day she's dealing with ABAL, these kind of sites and these preparedness sites and these attending these private meetings outside of church, well, she's basically being drawn in to a point of no return. And while the church leaders are doing their best to try to fight this, well, it's not easy, because a few of these things actually merge in strange ways with their belief systems, and it's hard to kind of discipline for one thing and not the other. To be honest, it was a very difficult situation for the church leaders to be in, period. This is no way, shape, or form attacking the Mormon religion, but we're trying to figure out why Lori ended up straying away from the main doctrine and going into this branch that led her down this very dark path. And what we're learning is, before Julie Rowe come along, Chad Daybell, Roger Young, and a few others were already talking about these things. And there are people, we're not mentioning their names, because they are very good at being secret. And the people who support them are very good at protecting them. But I can tell you that many of them really believe that they're true, godly-like beings who have these very huge superpowers and gifts to manipulate electricity, health, and they are inspiring other members who follow them. And they recruit and re-recruit, and these people learn and they recruit, teaching that they each have some kind of gift to give to this group. And so it's very toxic. So now this should probably have you pretty prepared to move on in the timeline. And we will talk more about other things that we deal with, especially translated beings, Zion, as we move forward. I'll give you a little bit information here and there instead of such a long 30-minute version of it. I want to ask you guys, if you do like the work that I do and you like helping the missing, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and definitely hit the like button, and share your thoughts below, no matter what they are. And if you know something we don't, definitely share in the comments below. Maybe you know some of these people claiming to have gifts to where they can actually manipulate electricity. And please, guys, do not forget about our missing girls. We still have Dulce. We have Jasmine Robinson, Summer Wells. There's so many of them, guys. Kiara Coles, they're still missing, and we still have no updates. This is probably one of the cleanest videos I've done in a long time. Probably isn't perfect, but it's cleaner. So thank you guys for those that have supported me. And if you would like to support this channel, you can go to Patreon and just donate whatever you can when you can. I'm so glad to be back here with you guys. I hope you're all doing great. I love you guys, miss you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.